let me go through with you the presentation for today. I will not take a long time for this presentation because the meat will be in the live demo itself. But before we start, I think today's session is more towards how you actually can secure your web application and also how we actually enhance your API and also we protect your API, right? So, but before we do that, let us look into what is actually happening right now, right, in the application landscape and what's the challenges out there that is our customer is facing, right? So, as you can see from this deck itself, we built our apps everywhere now, right? So they are no longer static, and we have actually multiple personas right now that is dealing with the application deployment, right? It's not only just the network operator or the security operator, but now we are actually having more colleagues or maybe joining up into deploying your application everywhere, right? So regardless whether this is in your private data center or in the public cloud, right? So we have a lot of this what we call different environments to deal with, and it's now not just one single environment. We also have something called edge location, right? So be it a smart branches or smart endpoints that is actually actively processing the data, right? With this kind of landscape, well, we are seeing a lot of what we call choke points, right, for us to deploy securities, right? There might be cases that with human error or maybe we introduce some of the mistakes, and actually all this will be capitalized by the bad guys, right? So as you can see from here, we have multiple controls on each of the different environments, right? So how are we going to manage all this what we call security configuration over with all the complexity, right? So I think this will actually increase the risk as well, right? So I think this is something that we really need to look into, right? So we are here to help. So today we're actually introducing to the audience that this is what we call a F5 Distributed Cloud WAF, right? So this is what we are trying to solve and actually to demo today. So the tool of choice of this platform, right, is basically what we call F5 Distributed Cloud. So basically today we will be focusing on web application protection and also API protection, right? A quick intro to the product itself is basically a top tier service that F5 provides. So we have the best in class WAF engine as well as the bot and also fraud engine, right? So this particular platform and solution can be deployed anywhere, right? So if regardless of any cloud of your choice, data centers or edge location, right? So we are actually solving this in a particular problem. So this particular platform, it consists of multiple pillars, right? So it can be deployed anywhere of your choice, right? So let's take a deeper dive into the platform itself, right? So this is basically a service, a WAF service. How this platform was built is basically a combination of a F5 best of breed of technologies, right? So that is serve different kinds of personas, right? So we take all these components, right? So it's basically the proven and highly effective technology from F5. So we actually combine all this together into all the single offering, which is the WAAP, right? As you can see from this slide itself, we have our DDoS mitigation, the L3 to L7 protection to the apps that is being hosted on this platform, right? So we also have our next-gen WAF that take care of all the different threats towards the app that you host on our platform, right? Same goes to we have our bot defense to detect and also mitigate bot frauds, right? So this is something that we can actually look into in the next series, right? So for today, we'll be more focusing on the web application protection and also the API security, right? So which all built on top of our F5 Distributed Cloud SaaS platform. So we actually cater this for multiple cloud environment, regardless of on-prem or edge location, right? So we do have other integrated services such as DNS and also load balancing capabilities, CDN as well, and also something called application traffic insights, and also some other application services that you can actually leverage in a one single platform, right? So with that, this is basically we provide a centralized control with regardless of what you deploy and where you deploy your application, right? Regardless of whether you deploy your application on premises, on the edge, or regardless of this hyperscaler, right? So we provide a single central point of management, and also we provide visibility. If let's say you guys are into basically automation, you guys can actually use all the tools that is being provided by us. But let us get started with some of the key features like what I mentioned earlier in the WAAP series, right? So this is basically a two-part series. So in this first part, basically what we'll be covering is the web application firewall and also the API security, right? So let us take a deep dive into what we actually offer in this F5 Distributed Cloud WAF, right? So in this F5 Distributed Cloud WAF platform, so there's actually two components in it, right? So we actually have our signature-based identification, where we provide a varieties of signatures to basically match some of these bad requests that is coming in. For example, some known attacks like Log4J attacks, and also the very common OWASP top 10 kind of attacks. We also do have our threat campaigns, right? Threat campaign is basically something that is developed by our SRRT team, the Security Incident Response team. So they actually help to actually correlate all these kind of attacks, and they will come up with a signature. Basically, this signature will basically reduce some of your false positive into your application attacks, right? So this is the first part of it. Another part of it is basically behavioral-based identification, right? So how do you determine that this is an ongoing attack or this is something that is ongoing, right? So F5 Distributed Cloud WAF can basically identify that, right? So we can identify some of this anomaly or basically some of the behavior, right? For example, I can come in yesterday, right, to perform some sniffing towards your website, and then after a few days, I will come again and basically sniff, right? So with F5 Distributed Cloud WAF, we are able to detect that basically by behavioral-based kind of attack, right? So this will actually further reduce false positive as well, right? So with that, I would like to share with you some of this console. So later on, I will walk you through with this the console itself. Bear with me. So this is only a few slides I would like to share with you on some of our key features on our next generation WAF, right? So like what I mentioned earlier, we have a robust signature WAF engine that we provide with advanced behavioral detection. So all this thing is a combination of not just our learnings from the field. This WAF engine is basically better tested in many enterprises, right? So we also provide automatic attack signature tuning, but based on our SRRT team, the threat campaign, right? So like what I mentioned earlier, the user behavioral analysis. Later on, I will showcase some of this in my demo, right? So this is something that if let's say there's any ongoing attack, upcoming attack, so we can actually pick this up, and basically this is something that it will be showing up in the dashboard itself, right? So with that, right, so we normally in any environment, right, it's not only just one application, right? So we have multiple applications that will be coincide inside this platform. So we do have a multi-app dashboard to cater for different personas, be it a security operation, a network operation. For example, same goes to your application owner as well, right? So we provide a rich observability for our customers, right? So this is the dashboard that we'll be showcasing later in my demo, right? So with that, let me quickly jump into the next topic by itself. This is basically the API protection, right? So with the API protection, this is something that we can look into further into the demo later. So this is basically the API discovery key feature that we can offer in our F5 Distributed Cloud WAF, right? So nowadays we know that there's a lot of API firing up aware, right? So anywhere, right? So how do you know what sort of API is basically a scheduled API, right? So do you have any mechanism for you to detect that? So F5 Distributed Cloud API protection, basically we come with API discovery. So with that, you are able to detect and basically to know what sort of API that is coming in towards your environment, right? So with that visibility, you can actually apply adequate security, be it rate limiting, be it API schema, or basically we can apply open API specs over at our API protection, right? So later on, I will showcase with you how we can actually easily upload a Swagger file towards our F5 Distributed Cloud service, right? So with that, this is all the key features that we shared earlier, right? So we have our automated discovery. How do we know what sort of API traffic that is coming into your environment, right? So with this automated discovery, you can actually detect some of this anomaly, right? So if let's say this is something not intended for this API, like for example, there's some shadow API happening inside your environment, basically we can detect all these outliers, right? So same goes to OWASP API, right? So nowadays we have a lot of attacks. So later on, I will showcase with you how we can actually prevent that. So like what I mentioned earlier also, Swagger import, how can you actually upload open API spec file, basically to enhance and basically enforce this positive security model, right? So with all that, I would like to share with you today a typical deployment architecture of a public API, because today's session is more geared towards the API security. So let's us see what is a typical deployment of a public API, right? So as you can see, first and foremost, a simplistic view of how API are being deployed and are being used in most cases, right? So we have a main DC, or maybe you guys are hosting your API in the cloud, right? So definitely there will be somewhere, right? So regardless of this is on-prem or basically is in a public cloud, it doesn't matter. So we have our DC, and usually this is a API gateway that will be exposing our API services, right? So once you expose your API using our F5 Distributed Cloud, so this is something that you can do, right? So with F5 Distributed Cloud API security, you can actually enforce application security, layer 7 application security. We do provide API discovery as well, like what I mentioned. You are able to deploy API security module on top of the API that you expose to the public, right? So basically, if you are deploying your API protection on our F5 Distributed Cloud platform, we basically will take care of the L3 and L4 DOS attack. So by leveraging on our global Anycast network, so this means you can actually speed up the requests coming from different regions, right? So it can be some requests coming from US, it can be a request coming from a different region, right? So all this traffic will be routed towards the RE, or basically our POP that is closest towards the region, right? So with all that, I think this is basically the package that we offer to our customers, right? So, but the thing is, we want to look into some of the security challenges that or what you should think about when you are rolling out any API security, right? So first up is basically a combination of a positive security model and also a negative security model, right? So let's just take a look into the positive security model, right? So how we allow the known good, and basically how we actually allow those good traffic that you know to come into your API service, right? So we need to take care of the open API specs and how you actually your security cater for any non-API traffic, right? So for example, right, when you deploy API security, so you can enforce using like HTTP verb, right? So I allow only HTTP GET, right? For example, right? So after that, you can actually specify more in depth, like for example, which URL endpoint, right? So we actually can do that, and also we allow API, non-API, right? So this is something that we need to coexist with not only just API traffic, but some of this traffic that is that you publish, right? So this is something on the positive security note, right? So on the negative security side, so how can we enforce and also block or rate limit any malicious request, right? So like what I mentioned earlier, do you guys have any mechanism to basically know what is firing any request to the particular service or particular URL endpoint as well, right? So how do you enforce and block all these malicious requests? So another note is basically, can we actually check the payload inside the API request? And also we need to leverage any IP intelligence to block any known good and also bad requests coming from botnets or maybe spam houses or etc. Right? So this is something that we can actually leverage using our F5 XC API security. Right? So towards the last point, how can we actually leverage on machine learning to help understand and discover the API service, right? So this is towards your API landscape, right? How can you help yourself to discover any unused API, or maybe some of this what we call a zombie API, or maybe shadow API inside your environment, right? So with that, we also have something called anomaly detection. So how can we help to detect and also visualize any search of API traffic, right? So this is all the security capabilities that we can actually help our customers, right? So without further ado, I would like to quickly jump into the demo. But before that, let me show to the audience what is our demo setup today, right? So basically, a very simple setup, right? So this is the demo setup, as you can see from here. What I can do later today is basically we will set up a HTTP load balancer, a service that will be fronting our API nodes, or maybe say a service that we are hosted regardless of anywhere, right? So all this will be fronted by our XCS, our F5 Distributed Cloud, right? So once you expose this using our F5 Distributed Cloud, basically we will take care of the L3, L4 DOS attack, and also we will provide the web application protection and also API discovery and API security, right? So what we'll do here later, we will set up a HTTP load balancer. This is the website that you guys can enter, and basically you can test it out later. And actually the origin pool is basically another service that I will be proxying over, right? So let us see what is the demo that we will be showing you, right? What I will do is I will basically bring you to the console itself. I'll basically provide you with a walkthrough of the console. And what we'll do is I will import a Swagger file into the console itself and basically apply some security. I will enforce certain control and basically perform some attacks. And also apply different controls of positive and negative security model. And we'll showcase with you how we can actually learn the API security, right? So the machine learning side of API discovery, right? So with that, let me quickly share my screen. I'll jump straight away into my demo. Okay, so I hope you guys still can see the screen by itself. So this is basically the F5 Distributed Cloud console. So when you first start up the service, you'll be prompted by a login page once you sign in. So this is basically the page that you will be seeing. So let me quickly navigate back to the home page. So this is basically the welcome overview page that you'll be able to look at. So for today, what we will do is we will basically configure some web application to protect my application, right? So let me get started. So this is basically the console that I'll be clicking in. So as you can see, what I'll need to do right now, I will create something called a HTTP load balancer, right? So once I click on it, I've actually pre-built some demo, but anyhow, today I will basically guide you through how can you create a simple service, right, in just a few minutes, right? So you can just go into the add HTTP load balancer, click on this. So we'll be greeted by this page. So you can just type in the name. So type in the domain, right? So what I'll be using is basically a pre-built FQDN, because I've actually delegated my domain over to this portal. So I will not go through this with you today, but because you guys can actually delegate some of this domain over to our F5 Distributed Cloud Console, right? So after that, once you have typed in this domain, okay, you basically can select with automatic certification creation. So basically, you can actually use our HTTPS automatic cert creation by Let's Encrypt, or if you want, you can actually use your own cert as well, right? So this is something that you can do, right? So, but for now, what I can do here is I'll just select automatic cert creation. Then what I need to do here is I will need to point this origin pool, right? So origin pool is the one that I showcased to you guys earlier in the demo environment setup, right? So I pre-created this juice shop application, right? So this is basically the origin pool. I can actually view the configuration from here. So like what I shared earlier, so this is the origin server that will be proxying, right? So this is the public DNS name. If you guys go into this site, it will basically navigate to the exact site, right? So I'll not go through today, but I'll actually pre-created this origin pool. So let us click apply. Okay. So with that, actually, I created this HTTP load balancer. I can also apply a WAF policy onto this, right? So this is how easy that you can actually tie a WAF policy on top of the HTTP load balancer. What you need to do here is basically go into the security configuration, go to the web application firewall, select from the drop-down list, click on enable, right? Select enable app firewall, right? Select on the pre-created profile. So this is something that I pre-created. Let us look into what is being created, right? So let us view the configuration. Okay, so from the configuration itself, this is basically a few key items that we need to look into. What is the enforcement mode, right? So the enforcement mode here is basically in the blocking stage, right? So if let's say you guys want to stage it, I mean, you can still let it something called transparent mode. So all the traffic will still flow through this WAF, but it will not be a blocking stage, right? But you guys can see a lot more requests that is coming in, right? So, but for now, I'll basically put this in a blocking mode, right? So we have a lot of other settings over here, but today we will not go through each of this. But if you guys can also leverage on the free credit later, you guys can actually have a look into this, right? So let us quickly enable the WAF protection, right? So, and then that's about it, right? So this is how you can actually create a HTTP load balancer pointing towards your application, right? So with a few simple clicks, this is how easy you can actually onboard your application with a WAF protection, right? So you just need to click on a few things, and then you can actually proceed with the basic security protection. For those that is into automation and also you want to integrate all this using your CI/CD pipelining tool, you can actually do that using our API, right? So all these things can be integrated with your towards your CI/CD pipelining, right? So for today, for the sake of presentation, I'll just use the UI, right? So click save and exit. So with that, this is something that we have actually created, like maybe like just in 5 minutes, right? So as you can see from now, at the back end, they're actually firing up some API, basically to do all the certification and stuff like that, right? So in a short while, what you guys can see, basically all this website is basically accessible, right? So let's wait for a while. But with that, okay, so I think it's very fast. So everything is now up and running. So what I'll do here is I'll just go to this page that I've created, right? So as you can see, we are able to navigate towards the website with the WAF protection in place, right? So as you can see, I'm using the automated certification tool that is provided inside our F5 Distributed Cloud service, right? So everything is secure. The certification is also provided by our F5 as well, right? So all this is basically up and running, right? So as you can see, it's so easy for you to actually onboard web application protection using a few clicks, right? So we can actually navigate around using through this website, and we can actually see what is going on with this website itself, right? So I think we will just quickly issue a tag, right? So maybe I'll just do a simple attack on this website, and let's see what we can get out of this. Okay, as you can see, we are actually just using a very simple XSS kind of attack, and actually this request has been rejected, right? So as you can see, this is the error message that is being put up by our F5, and we also have our support ID, right? So let us copy this support ID, and let's see what we can actually find in the discovery, or basically the request itself. Let's go back to the request, right? So in the console itself, like what I mentioned earlier, right? So we also provide a lot of visibility into the application, right? So as you can see, this is basically the security dashboard for the SecOps. So I want to drill down into more details, right? So this is basically the console that is populated by the request just now. So what I need to do here is I want to know just now, actually I fire some requests, right? So I can go into the request. I can add something called filter, right? So I can just type in like request ID, right? So this is basically the value that is copied from here. So I'll just select from here because F5 Distributed Cloud WAF, they are able to detect this is the request ID. So I click apply. So this is the filter that I'm getting, right? So this is the client IP 14.192.208.10. So as you can see, this is my IP. This is my public IP itself. They are able to pick up my IP, the source IP. So let's see what is inside the request, right? So this is all the information that is being collected, right? So when is it firing? What's the duration that is coming in? What's the latency? What's the total duration for this particular request? And why is it being blocked, right? So as you can see, this is the GET method. This is the request path towards the website, right? So this is the WAF that is is currently in place, right? So this is all the service that is being provisioned, right? So as you can see from here, we can actually pick up a very granular kind of request, right? Each of the requests that is being pumped over here, basically we are able to pick it up, right? So this is the first part of the request, right? So I would like to also share with you, because by only just firing one request, it doesn't mean anything, right? So I'll be using OWASP ZAP to basically simulate more attack, right? So from here, I'll just basically fire away some of this attack. Then you can actually, later on, we will revisit this console itself. Hopefully, we can see more details on the attacks. Okay, so with that, we actually concluded with the WAF security protection. But for now, let us go back into the API security protection, right? So like what I mentioned earlier, what I need to do here is basically enforce the API security, right? So how can we actually do that using open API specs? So as you can see from here, what we can do is basically upload the Swagger file, right? So as you can see, this is the Swagger file tab. Under the manage, under the file, we can actually do that by uploading our Swagger file, right? So I've actually uploaded a sample, but I would like to share with you how does it look like a typical Swagger file, right? So as you can see from here, this is how a typical Swagger file will look like. So as you can see, this is the base path, and we actually allow like a GET, a request, right, a HTTP verb, right? So all this thing is being defined in advance, right? So what I'll do is I'll actually get this Swagger file, and basically what I'll do is I'll import over into this console, right? So let us see how can we do that, right? So what we'll do here is I'll add a Swagger file. We just give it the name. So I'll just upload the Swagger file. So this is basically the Swagger file that I'll be uploading. So with that few clicks, I'm actually uploading the Swagger file towards the console, right? So once I uploaded the Swagger file, I need to go into the API definition, right? So with that, let's us go into the API definition. So I need to create something called API definition, right? So same goes to that. I need to give it a name. So from here, I need to I need to refer back to the the Swagger file that I actually uploaded, right? So this is the one that I've uploaded, WAP. So that's about it, right? So once I've uploaded, just click Save and Exit. Okay. So this is how we actually perform the uploading of the Swagger file, and we define the API definition in uh, the console itself, right? So with that, I think what we can do over here is I want to fire some of these requests using Postman, right? So I want to share with you that just now I've actually tried to use a UI, basically a browser, to access towards the browser, or maybe towards the service, right? But now what I want to use is basically a Postman, basically a API tool, so I can actually fire away some of this API, right? So as you can see, when I fire this wap.fi.e1.page, so what I'm trying to do here is basically a query, right? So as you can see from here, basically I'm asking, right, what sort of item that I can retrieve from the website itself, right? So with the WAP protection, everything seems working fine. So I can actually see what sort of item that I can retrieve from this API service. So basically, I'm actually asking, and by firing an API request, a GET request, I'm actually asking what sort of content that I'm able to retrieve. Right? So this is basically an API request, right? So what I'll do now is basically go back to the console. What we will do here, we will be basically applying the API specification and basically allow only the open API specs, right, that is intended for query, right? Because like what I mentioned earlier, the open API spec already define all the HTTP verbs inside the open API spec file, right? So what I try to do here is basically do that. So let's just go back to the configuration. So let's see how can we actually do that, right? So we will not mess with the origin pool and also the creation of our WAP service that we created. So what we will not try to do here is we will create something called a service policy, right? So as you can see from here, we need to define something called a service policy, right? So let's look into what is a service policy, right? A service policy, inside a service policy, basically what we will do here, sorry, it's a bit slow. Okay, so let's go into the configuration itself. So this is basically what is being defined, right? So this is something that I pre-built earlier. So I want to share with you what is inside the service policy, right? So inside this service policy, we have something called rules, right? So we basically allow all the baseline API security specification, like for example, the API security specification that we actually allowed earlier, and we actually deny some of this HTTP verb, like for example, the delete request, right, from the request itself, right? So this is something that we actually can set inside the service policy. And also, lastly, we need to create something called allow rest of the request, right? For example, inside your environment, there will be some other requests as well, right? For example, we have other non-API requests. We do want to allow that, right? But this service policy, what does it mean? Is basically allow all the requests that I defined in the open API spec file, right? So maybe when I click inside, you guys will have some better idea. So inside here, we will basically need to match the exact value basically that is defined inside the open API spec file. Okay, so this is something that I've uploaded earlier in the open the API management site. Okay, so this is how it works. So let us look into this, right? So I've created this demo because due to lack of time, I've actually created this demo. So rest assured is basically something similar. So what I need to do over here is basically just to define the service policy, right? So this is the service policy that I created earlier, okay? So let us quickly jump back into the Postman, right? So we actually performed some HTTP requests earlier. So this is basically firing some requests to ask for what's the content that is inside this API, right? So I think we have no problem with that. But what I need to do here is I want to use something that is not being defined, right? So like for example, right, if I ask something that is the HTTP verb is delete, right? So what will actually happen? So the request will definitely get rejected. As you can see, this is basically the support ID, right? So let us get the support ID and we'll see what is actually generated inside the console itself, right? So hope you guys get the idea. So what I'm trying to do here is basically I'm using a non-allow HTTP verb to ask for something, right? So definitely with that, it will be blocked by my service policy, okay? So let us go back to the demo. So I'll need to go back to the security page. I go to the demo. So I can go into the security event or maybe request. Right. So this is basically from the security event itself. If you can see from here, I've actually fired a delete request, right? So this is the method that I'm using just now, right? So this is the method that I'm using just now. So the result of this is because it will definitely get denied, right? Because I've actually applied the API specification on my HTTP load balancer. So everything that is not a permit inside this open API spec will be get denied, right? So this is something that you can actually get from here. And also, as you can see from here, this is the path that actually I'm firing. And as you can see from here, we can actually define based on security events, right? So this is the service policy that I applied earlier. So you guys can actually like deselect some of this filter and jump back into the security event, like for example, a WAF request. Right? So this is how easy that you can actually apply or API security on top of that. Right? So with that, I want to also touch upon some of these some of the features that is available inside our F5 Distributed Cloud WAF and API protection, right? So we just only cover the surface because today's session we are just sharing only the WAF side and also the API side, but there's a lot of things to it, right? Because like for example, bot defense, we'll share later in the series, and also rate limiting, right? So this is something that you can actually do, right? So if you guys want to know more, you can actually turn on this advanced view. You will actually generate some of this new other stuff that is actually hidden, right? So the first thing that I want to share is basically IP reputation, right? So like what I've shared earlier, right? So when you publish all this service out there in the world, you want to limit some of these requests coming from, like, for example, spam sources, right? Some scanners or maybe like window exploit, right? From spam houses, all these things. So what you can do is basically adding all this IP reputation service that is provided free together with our offering, right? So all these things can be added into your HTTP load balancer creation, right? So it's just how easy by just using this service, you can actually get all this IP reputation service that is from F5, right? So this is basically one of it, right? And after that, we also have user identifier. We can actually check where the user comes from based on like IP address. We can also define more granular by identifying whether this is a returning customer or not by knowing their TLS fingerprint and stuff, right? So with that also we can apply rate limiting, right? So this is something that you can apply rate limiting on the particular server URL. Like for example, you want to apply this into all the path, right? For example, you want to apply a specific domain or any domain, right? So this is something that you can actually do, right? So I can apply this on the base path, or I can apply it on the particular service itself, right? For the particular endpoint itself, right? So I can apply like threshold, like maybe 1 second, 1 minute, whatever, right? So we can actually count by the user identifier, right? Is it a returning customer based on IP addresses, based on their TLS fingerprint, right? So there's a lot of things that you can actually tune into this, right? So this is how the overall look and feel, right? But without this, right? So I think it's very hard for any administrator to know what they can actually apply. But I think the last one thing that I want to share is basically the API discovery, right? So this is something that I have not covered earlier, but this is basically the last piece that I would like to cover, right? So you can actually turn on the the API discovery using our API discovery inside the console, right? So this is how you look at it, right? So under the HTTP load balancer, under the security tab. So this is just a mock-up that is basically created from our previous API, right? Because for today's session, I can't generate a lot of requests. So I just want to give you some idea. So when you turn on API discovery, so this is what you can actually get, right? So this is something that is very cool and useful for all the service that you actually publish. So to give you some idea, if let's say any of you guys publish any API, right? So using our HTTP, using our F5 distributed cloud, so this is something that you can actually get from our distributed cloud, right? So we can actually discover what is the API that is coming in, and also what is those that is not being discovered, right? So those that is in red color. So as you can see, I can click on this and I can see what sort of traffic that is coming in, right? So like all this API category is deemed as a shadow API. We can see what's the error rate that is coming in, whether do we discover any PII, right? Like for example, any credit card information and stuff like that, right? So all these things can be generated and basically downloaded and output into a Swagger file, right? So in this table itself, we can actually share with you what sort of path that is being vulnerable, right? All these things is not being discovered earlier, right? So like for example, in this case, we have actually a credit card number that is being discovered, right? So something that is useful, right? But with that, I think this is something that is it can be generated easily using our F5 distributed cloud platform, right? So it's a very cool feature that you can actually turn on by using just a few clicks, right? So let's go back to our WAF page. Just now, actually, I fire up some of the ZEP requests. Let's see what sort of requests that we are getting. Okay, so let's go back to the securities page. Go back to this WAF console. So for the past 5 minutes, I've actually generated quite a number of attacks. I'm not sure whether is it showing up. So as you can see, when we fire the WASP attack, so some of this attack is being generated, and we can see quite a number of requests that is actually firing for the past one last hour, right? So as you can see, we actually brought some of these requests that is coming in, right? So this is how easy for you to actually get on board to this distributed cloud console itself. So we are only touching, like what I mentioned earlier, we are only touching the surface on the distributed cloud. We do have other services like a bot defense and also DDoS that will be shared by my colleague in the next series. So with that, I hope that this session will give you some idea how can you actually get on board, how easily for you to get on board with our F5 distributed cloud protection, with our WAF protection, and also the API protection.